speak in English. I'm very happy to be here as part of this event, having worked with Pravinji for many years, and I'm very impressed by the work he has been doing over the last years. We have worked together on the Puma materials, which we have collected in the Dobes project together with Vishnuji, a project which lasted for 4 years altogether, 5 years, actually 5 years, working on Puma and Chintang. So I've been involved in documentation work for quite some time. That was mainly on language, but we also focused very much on ritual and cultural issues. And so myself, I'm almost now for 30 years involved in Mundum studies. First I have worked on the Mewangrai in the Sangkwa Valley, and so I know that this is a very rich and lively tradition, which is yet anyhow still living, but also very much endangered because the younger generation often does not pick up this vast knowledge very much anymore, and it's losing ground almost every year. So I think that's why it's so important to record all this and write it down. Even though the tradition itself is an oral tradition, I always have to emphasize this again and again, because I know in the Limbu community there is a strong written tradition as well, using the Sri Janga script. But yet also among the Limbu, I just come back from Panchtar, where I did a little bit of research also on the rituals. Also among the Limbu, actually in the villages, the ritual Mundum tradition is also very much still now an oral tradition. That means it's spoken, it's sung, it's a musical tradition as well as a textual tradition. And so I think it's important to keep this in mind, that one also has to record these things not only as written texts, but also as a musical event. And I think this is one point which has been realized by Pravinji early on, because he always approached the Mundum as an artist, which I found very unique, because mostly we are scholars, we are mostly working in the academia only with a scholarly and academic perspective, but he also has this perspective, but also he is an artist, a filmmaker, so he has also very much acknowledged and perceived the aesthetic part of the Mundum, because one cannot take it apart. You cannot just study the Mundum as a text or just as a practice, but you have to see it as a total piece of art. We could say, we have in German the word Gesamtkunstwerk, which is usually not translated into English because it's a German word which goes back to Richard Wagner, the great musician in the 19th century, who was very strongly in favor of having a kind of art which includes not only words but also music, and as well as performance, smells, action, dance. All these things come very much together, and I think the Mundum is a very good example of this kind of a Gesamtkunstwerk, and I think one has to study it as such. And that's also what I'm doing now more and more. I'm in Vienna now setting up an archive, and also this is an issue which has come up right now, that we have to archive these things, not only record them, but also it's important to keep them for later generations. And so it's very important that the recordings we are now more and more making, also here in Nepal, by many people in the villages, these recordings can only be of use for later generation if we put them into a proper digital archive. And that's now easier than before, because now we have the technical facilities for storage. There's large storage facilities on servers. So I hope that all these materials, which are now collected in many parts in valleys all across of Nepal, also find their way into some archive, so that it will also be used by later generations. So I'm very glad that to see all this work being done, and I'm glad to also contribute from my side with my experience if there is any demand. And so I'm very glad to have this interchange with you all. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm glad to be here.